The most obvious one is what a number of the panelists in studio, out of studio have alluded to, Galamsey. And I want to acknowledge that there are enough great minds here and outside to speak to that. But from the onset of this disaster, I've been concerned about one aspect that has probably been lost in the narrative, and that is our national emergency response. From Apiete, if I'm not mistaken, yes, 2022, about a year later, 2023, the Akosombo Dam spillage, and then now this disaster. It's very clear that although we have the institutions, we don't seem to have a cohesive response mechanism. And why this is very worrisome, of course, Apiete was worrisome because of, the fatalities that occurred, as well as the destruction of lives and livelihoods.
But it looks like a great job was done in rebuilding Apiete.
Well,
right.
That was after the fact.
That's right.
How we responded immediately, for instance. In this one, there are cans called something cocoa bottle. I didn't see the footage, but I heard about it. And by the time I was looking for it, I think the media had been sensitized to pull it out, or pull it off the screens. I cannot imagine that in this day and age, any human being, let alone the caliber of the people who were lost, that their remains will be carried in cocoa sacks. So when you start digging deeper, you ask yourself, what was the response mechanism? I know now, from whatever sources that I have, that the whole response mechanism had at its center national security. But national security alone is not the response mechanism. You need, for instance, the National Fire Service to be part of it. What we call in Ghana the National Ambulance Service, although decentralized, should be part of it. The Ghana Police Service should be part of this response mechanism for this event. Then, of course, the Ghana Armed Forces, and particularly the Ghana Armed Air Force, which operates the machines. Where were the body bags? Could they have been flown by another helicopter and dropped on the treetops for them in a very dignifying manner, not in cocoa sacks, for them to be, put in those zip bags in order to preserve whatever remains there were, and in order not for those remains or fluids, whatever, to contaminate those who were carrying them. It's very, very, I can't imagine how I can explain it. So, God forbid, touch wood, if the president had been on this flight, can you imagine the president of Ghana, whose remains in an air crash, were being carried in a cocoa sack? We need to address our emergency response.
Was that not the immediately available sort of container or cover at a point where the residents were already invading the place, and there was no opportunity for the national security and the other institutions you mentioned to get there, because they did not get there first. Later, when you look at the footages, you will see that fire service personnel were there, ambulance people were also there, but as we are told from the program grounds where in Aboagye they were having the launch, it took it takes 1 hour, almost an hour to get to that place.
You see, the obvious answer is what you've given. But when we talk about emergency response, if by the computation of the data that I have, this aircraft crashed 45 minutes after taking off at 0912. By about 9:53, thereabout, it had crashed. Now, if this was a time and the missing aircraft message, off-radar message, did not happen at the time that it crashed. It happened maybe a short while before.
That's right.
Now, when that announcement is made, the response mechanism kicks in. If you are a fire service and you've got an emergency information that there has been an aircraft crash, you don't go there, excuse my language, empty-handed. If you are a national ambulance service, knowing that there are going to be casualties, including the injured, you don't go there empty-handed. You go with nurses and medication and equipment to do triage, to offer, on-site medical assistance and so on. Now, the recovery of these bodies, because they were then dead, is part of the emergency response. I am saying that for the purposes of dignity, somebody, national security person who was in the blue shirt, could have told his principals that we have secured the bodies, the remains. Can you please make available some decent material? I mean, assuming that they were in the sacks and they were covered with polythene, that would even have been fine. But if you live this life with all the service that you are doing to your nation, and you are carried in cocoa sacks, and let me use the tree word, cocoa bottle. You see what I mean? And somebody told me, though, it looked like they were carrying banche. You know banche?
It's true.
Cassava. I mean, is that how we treat the gone, those who are leaving us? Now, let me give you another angle of the emergency response.
Would you still have a problem if they had managed to stop the media from filming these bodies remains being in the sacks?
Yeah.
Would you have been okay with that?
Well, if you didn't know, say ignorance is bliss. So once you didn't see the footage or footages, that will be all right.
Okay, tell us about
it. It will be by word of mouth. But the last one is, and I'm asking rhetorically, what psychosocial support, trauma, whatever support, are we providing the family? Because it's part of the emergency response, not only of those who are involved in the crash, but those who are affected, those who are related. The woman who collapsed yesterday when she was going to lay the reef, for instance, and was rushed to 37. Are we paying attention to the circumstances or conditions under which the families are bearing with this disaster? So, broadly speaking, our national emergency response is not up to scratch. And the earlier we address that, the better. Because given the frequency of these disasters, I don't want to be prophetic or whatever, but I look at the frequency, 2020, 2023, 2025, then you add the history of the caseloads prior. We need to be prepared.
In 2015, the flood and fire disaster at Circle.
Yeah, that's right.
June 3. You saw pickups were driven there, people were put in polythene bags, and we saw them being thrown into the polythene bags, charred remains. Doesn't look different.
May 9.
Well, it just confirms that we are still not learning the right lessons, if at all there are any lessons to learn. I find it difficult to believe that 24 hours, 48 hours after the crash, a second helicopter, in fact, in the immediate aftermath of the crash, one would expect that a second helicopter should have been flown to see whether the site could be located. Thankfully, there were persons, locals on the ground who saw it. And I've mentioned national security. Its tentacles, who are human beings in the communities, were the ones who relayed the signal to national security. You know, but how national security coordinated with the other agencies.
A message.
You say,
I'll bring it.
yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. I was going to tell you that
would your information be different if you knew that this is the number of serviceable helicopters we have in this country?
So I didn't want to say that.
That's the number of and that helicopter was picking chiefs at the time from Boku to Kumasi with this.
And what you are talking about, which you have shown me earlier, we can't say it publicly,
we can't
right?
say it publicly.
No, I didn't want to say that. So I was rather
So you were
posing
looking for
questions.
helicopters to follow
The
up.
fact that no helicopter
You don't have that
flew
luxury.
meant that probably we didn't have one that was serviceable. We have them, but they are not serviceable. Look, before the Honorable Nitu left office, sometime before, I was sitting at home when General Bedakwa invited me at the request of the former minister to attend a meeting at MOD in his office. It was about the state of equipment of the Ghana Armed Forces. All the three services lined up their senior officers to present the state or status of their equipment. And it's not a story that you want to share in
No, you
public.
can't.
From the Ghana Air Force to the Ghana Navy, and these are the repositories of, you know, very expensive equipment before you come to the Army, heavy guns and so on. I mean, if the guns are not firing, fine. Thankfully, nobody is going to attack us. But the issues for which we need the Ghana Navy and the Ghana Air Force are always happening. You see what I mean? So maybe like we saying about Galamsey, there's an opportunity also to review the mission readiness of the Ghana Armed Forces. Because look, we know what the Constitution says. The Ghana Armed Forces were set up, if you like, not to carry ministers around. But the job of the ministers is part of what keeps the nation together. So if there are helicopters that are available, which can take them so that their work will be more efficient, that is fine. But then we need to maintain the aircraft.
But the police bought 3 of these helicopters only recently.
Here on your set,
Dampari, right?
yes, on your set, you remember, you asked, or somebody asked, whether we should not probably have bought drones. Because maintaining a helicopter is not easy. You fly whatever number of hours, 8 hours, I believe. You need to, not 8 continuous hours, but if you log 8 hours, the helicopter must be down for a certain set of checks to be done.
Routine checks.
Probably these helicopters, or some of them, have reached the stage where they should have been broken down, palleted, and sent back to China. For China to do all the overhaul, box them up, bring them to Ghana, and then they will be assembled. But I think the elephant in the room is what you and I know on social media that we can't talk about in public. All the point I'm making is that our national emergency response mechanisms must be up to scratch. Assuming that we had, other than fatalities, serious injuries, were we going to carry those people on our shoulders, as we call in the Army, fireman lift? 45 minutes through the cocoa farm.
Right. So I'm bringing you in shortly. Now, the SACs, some explanation unofficial that we have had was that the condition of the remains, the body bags, it would have bent them or would have melted them, so to speak. I don't know if that's something you can
something
take.
we are finding
that's,
excuses.
and that the best appropriate thing to do at the time was to use the sacks.
You know, cocoa sacks are jute.
Correct.
Doesn't jute burn when you light the match? Jute will burn. So I think we are finding excuses. Look, some years ago, many years ago, what we call the cookhouses in the Ghana Armed Forces, we used to use rubbish bins, the metallic ones, before we got plastic. That was how we cooked the yam and put them in rubbish bins and serve soldiers. Then one day somebody woke up and said, look, why are we doing this to ourselves? We understand why we should put cooked yam or rice in those rubbish bins, but it doesn't look nice. Before we imported proper containers for, catering purposes. So we must not find excuse. I'm saying that. I mean, if any one of us can imagine that before those pictures were taken off the screen, one of the children of these 8 saw their father being carried in a cocoa sack, how would this child feel? It's like you have wasted your time serving your country. I mean, that's the simplest that I can put it. And you know that at the terminal end of everybody's life, the one thing that is important is dignity. And that is why when people die, even if we are poor, we mobilize all the resources that we can to give them a decent send-off. We don't just dump them anywhere. Of course, even the Muslim tradition is decent. How you are, wrapped up in the white shroud and so on and so forth. We didn't do well. We haven't done well. It's unfortunate that we cannot, recover ourselves from, this sucks, whatever it is. And I'm also asking, what psychosocial support are we giving to the family? I believe all the family members are sitting in their houses with occasional visits. Excuse me.
Okay. We went on the tour yesterday.
Yes.